When they told me my husband was dead, I remember the exact moment my body stopped listening to my mind. I was sitting on a chair that felt too hard. The room smelled like dust and old paper. Someone had placed a glass of water in front of me, but I did not touch it. I remember thinking how strange it was, that the world could look so normal, while mine had just ended. A man was speaking. His voice was calm, too calm. He used words that sounded careful. Words meant to soften a blow that could not be softened. Accident. Highway. Fire. No chance. I heard them, but they did not enter me. The only sentence that reached my heart was this: "Your husband did not survive." I nodded. Not because I understood, but because my body did not know what else to do. I did not scream. I did not fall. I did not cry. I just sat there, staring at a small crack on the wall, thinking how strange it was that a life could end in one sentence. I went home alone that day. The drive felt longer than usual. Every traffic light felt unnecessary. Every sound felt too loud. When I unlocked the door, the house welcomed me the way it always had. Quiet. Familiar. Daniel's shoes were still near the door. His jacket was hanging where he left it. I stood there for a long time, looking at that jacket. I touched it. It was cold. That was when my knees gave up. I sat down on the floor and pressed my face into the fabric. That was the first time I cried. Not loudly. Not the kind of crying people hear. The kind that shakes your chest and leaves you empty afterward. Daniel and I had been married for 12 years. They were not perfect years, but they were gentle ones. He was not a man who needed attention. He did not speak much, but when he did, his words mattered. He showed love in quiet ways, by fixing things without being asked, by sitting beside me when I was tired, by listening. When we argued, he did not raise his voice. He would go quiet instead. And later, he would say, "I didn't want to hurt you with my words." That was Daniel. We met when we were young, before life had made us careful. He used to say my name slowly, as if he wanted to remember it. When our son Michael was born, I saw a different man in him. He held that baby like something holy. "I will never leave," he said quietly. I believed him. The day he left for that work trip felt normal. Too normal. He kissed my forehead. He told Michael to behave. He joked about my cooking. 2 days, he said. "I'll be back." I watched him walk away, not knowing that moment would follow me for decades. After they told me he was dead, people filled the house. They brought food I could not taste. They spoke words I could not hear. Everyone kept saying the same things. "You're strong. You'll survive. You have your son." I nodded, because it was easier than saying that. I felt like I was already gone. There was no body. They said it was better that way. No funeral. No grave. No place to sit and talk to him. Only silence. Michael was 6 years old. 6 is too young to understand death, but old enough to feel absence. Every night, he asked the same question: "When is Daddy coming back?" At first, I said, "Soon." Then I said, "He's watching us." Then one night, he looked at me with serious eyes and said, "Mom, is Daddy gone forever?" That was the night I felt my heart crack again. I held him. I cried silently while he slept. When I finally told him the truth, he cried until there were no tears left. After that, he stopped asking. Children learn silence early. The years that followed were long. I became both parents. I learned how to fix things, how to make decisions alone. I attended school meetings alone, doctor visits alone. When Michael succeeded, There was no one beside me to share the pride. When he struggled, there was no one to say, "It will be okay." At night, the house felt too quiet. Sometimes I reached for Daniel in my sleep. Sometimes I woke up expecting him. Grief does not scream forever. It settles. It becomes part of you. People told me to move on. They said I was still young, that I deserved happiness. I smiled. I thanked them. But inside, my heart felt closed. Not broken. Closed. Like a door locked from the inside. I was not waiting for Daniel. I was just tired of losing. There were moments, late at night, when questions visited me. Why was there no body? Why did everything happen so fast? Why did the details never feel complete? Each time I asked, someone said, "Don't open old wounds." So I buried the questions. Michael grew up. He left home. And suddenly, the house was quiet again. I thought this was how my life would end. Simple. Silent. Acceptable. Until one ordinary afternoon. It was raining lightly. I went to the market for bread and vegetables. Nothing special. As I stood in line, I felt it. That strange feeling. Like someone was watching me. I turned slowly, and I saw him. At first, my mind refused it. The man was older. Grey hair. Thinner face. But the way he stood, my heart stopped. He turned his head. Our eyes met. And I knew. You do not forget the man you loved. Not even after 25 years. My hands began to shake. My ears rang. This was impossible. He was dead. They told me he was dead. I watched his face change. Recognition. Shock. Fear. He opened his mouth and said my name. That was when the world went silent. I did not stay. I dropped my basket. I walked out into the rain. I did not look back. Because if I did, everything I had built would collapse. I walked until my legs hurt. Until my chest burned. Alive. That word echoed inside me. When I reached home, I locked the door and slid down onto the floor. I cried the way I had not cried in years. Not for losing him, but for living a lie. That night, I did not sleep. I knew my life was about to change again. And I was afraid. That night after I saw him at the market, I stayed on the floor for a long time. I did not turn on the lights. I did not move. I just sat there, listening to my own breathing, feeling like a stranger in my own house. For 25 years, I had learned how to live with grief. I had learned how to wake up alone and not expect anything. How to sleep without reaching for someone who was no longer there. How to smile when people asked me if I was doing fine. But this feeling was different. This was not grief. This was fear. Fear that everything I believed about my life might be wrong. My mind tried to protect me. It told me I was tired. That I was imagining things. That I had seen a man who only looked like Daniel. I wanted to believe that voice. But my heart did not listen. Your heart remembers what your mind tries to forget. I went to bed just before dawn. When I finally slept, I dreamed of Daniel. Not the older man from the market, but the younger one. The one who laughed easily. The one who promised never to leave. I woke up with tears on my face. The next morning felt heavy. Like the air itself was pressing down on me. I made tea and forgot to drink it. I sat by the window and watched people walk by, living normal lives. I wondered how many of them were carrying secrets like mine. I tried to go on with my day. I cleaned slowly. Folded clothes that were already folded. I avoided mirrors. I was afraid of what I might see in my own eyes. Questions kept returning, no matter how hard I pushed them away. If it was really him, why now? Why after so many years? Why did he look afraid when he saw me? And the question that hurt the most: if he was alive, then what had my life been built on? For 2 days, I did not leave the house. I did not go back to the market. I did not answer calls. I sat with memories I had buried long ago. I remembered the early days after his death. How I woke up every morning thinking it was all a mistake. How I listened for his footsteps, even when I knew they would not come. I remembered Michael as a child, standing by the door, waiting. I remembered the way he stopped asking questions when he realized answers only brought pain. I had spent years protecting my son from heartbreak. Or at least I thought I had. Now I wondered if I had unknowingly protected someone else instead. On the 3rd day, I told myself something simple. If that man was not Daniel, he would not come looking for me. And if he was? I did not finish the thought. That evening, just as the sun began to set, there was a knock on the door. It was slow, careful. My heart stopped. I stood in the hallway, listening, hoping it would go away. There was another knock. My hands started shaking. I did not want to open the door, but I knew I would not find peace until I did. When I opened it, he was standing there. Daniel. Up close, there was no doubt. Time had changed him, but it had not erased him. His eyes filled with tears when he saw me. I didn't know where else to go, he said softly. His voice sounded older. Tired. I stepped aside and let him in. He stood in the living room like a visitor, like someone afraid to touch anything. This house looks the same, he said quietly. I did not answer. I sat down slowly. My legs felt weak. He remained standing. I thought you were dead, I said. My voice sounded calm, but my hands were shaking. I know, he replied. Those 2 words hurt more than anything else. You know. I looked at him for a long moment. You knew I believed you were dead? I asked. He nodded. I found out after I woke up, he said. They told me you had been informed. I closed my eyes. And you stayed away, I said. Yes. There was no excuse in his voice. Only truth. I asked the question that had waited inside me for 25 years. Why? He finally sat down, like the weight of that word had taken his strength. I was ashamed, he said. I thought you had already suffered enough. I let out a quiet laugh, not because it was funny, but because it hurt. Did you think I stopped suffering? I asked. He did not answer. He told me about the accident. How the car lost control. How everything burned. How he was pulled out barely alive. He told me about waking up in a hospital far from home. About injuries. About confusion. About not even remembering his own name at first. By the time he understood what had happened, months had passed. I thought I destroyed your life, he said. And I didn't know how to face you. You took my choice away, I said quietly. He lowered his head. I know. We talked for hours. Not loudly. Not angrily. Just 2 people trying to understand how a life could break without anyone meaning to break it. When he stood up to leave, the house felt heavy again. I won't come back unless you ask me to, he said. I did not stop him. That night, I sat alone in the dark. I realized something important. Grief had shaped my life for 25 years. But now, truth was about to reshape it again. And I did not know which one would hurt more. The next morning, I woke up feeling older than my years. Not tired in the body, but tired in the heart. I knew what had to be done. And knowing did not make it easier. I had to tell my son. For 25 years, Michael had lived with one truth. A hard truth, but a stable one. Now I was about to take it away from him. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at my phone. I picked it up. I put it down. Every sentence I thought of sounded wrong. How do you tell your child that the man he mourned was never gone? How do you explain that a life built on grief was built on a mistake? By the afternoon, I understood something. There is no right way to tell a painful truth. There is only an honest one. I called Michael. He answered on the second ring. "Hi, Mom. Is everything okay?" I closed my eyes. "No," I said. "I need you to come home." There was a pause. Just a small one. But I felt it. "Is something wrong?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "And I can't say it on the phone." "I'll be there tomorrow," he said. That night felt endless. I barely slept. Every sound made me sit up. Every thought led back to the same moment. What if he hates me? What if he thinks I lied to him all these years? What if this breaks him in a way I cannot fix? When morning came, I felt no relief. Michael arrived in the afternoon. He looked worried the moment he stepped inside. "Mom, what's going on?" he asked. I hugged him tightly. Longer than usual. "Sit with me," I said. We sat at the dining table. The same table where he once did homework. Where Daniel used to sit, reading the newspaper. I took a deep breath. "There is something I need to tell you," I said. He nodded, waiting. "Your father is alive." The words fell between us and stayed there. Michael stared at me. "What?" he said. "I met him," I said quietly. "He came here." For a moment, he said nothing. Then he laughed. A short, sharp laugh. "That's not funny," he said. "I'm not joking," I replied. His smile faded. Confusion crossed his face, then disbelief. "You told me he was dead," he said. "They told me he was dead," I said. I believed it too. He stood up suddenly. "For 25 years," he said, his voice shaking. "You let me believe my father was gone." "I believed it myself," I said. "You're saying he chose to disappear?" he asked. "No," I said carefully. "I'm saying fear kept him away." Michael began pacing the room. "I needed him," he said. "I needed my father." Tears filled my eyes. "So did I," I said. He stopped and looked at me. "Where is he now?" he asked. "He came here," I said. "He left." Michael stared at me like he could not believe what he was hearing. "And you let him leave?" he asked. "I didn't know what else to do," I said. He sat down slowly, his hands shaking. "I need to see him," he said. I nodded. "I know." That evening, Daniel came. I watched from the doorway as Michael stood in the living room, waiting. When Daniel walked in, both of them froze. They looked at each other for a long time. Father and son. Separated by time. Connected by blood. "You're supposed to be dead," Michael said. Daniel nodded. "I know. You missed everything," Michael said. "My childhood. My life." Daniel swallowed. "I know." Michael's voice rose slightly, not in anger, but in pain. "You don't get to say you know," he said. "You weren't there." Daniel lowered his head. "I was afraid," he said. "I was weak." Michael laughed quietly, the sound breaking in his chest. "I cried for you," he said. "When I was a child, I cried for you." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "I am so sorry," he said. Michael turned away. "I don't know who you are," he said. That meeting ended without peace. Michael left angry and confused. Daniel left looking smaller than before. And I stayed behind, holding the weight of both. The days that followed were heavy. Michael stopped calling as often. Daniel kept his distance. I stayed in the middle, between past and present, between truth and pain. I asked myself questions late at night. If I had known earlier, would my life be different? Would my son be less angry? Or would the pain have simply arrived sooner? One afternoon, I found Daniel sitting on the front steps. "I didn't want to come in," he said. "I just needed to sit here." I sat beside him. We did not touch. "I never stopped loving you," he said quietly. I closed my eyes. Love does not disappear easily, but trust does. "I don't hate you," I said, "but I don't know who we are anymore." He nodded. "Neither do I." Weeks passed. Slowly, Michael began asking questions. Not kindly, but honestly. Daniel answered every one. He did not defend himself. He did not hide. One evening, Michael said something that stayed with me. "He stayed away because he was scared," he said. "That's not the kind of man I want to be." In that moment, I understood something. Daniel's failure was becoming my son's lesson. And maybe that mattered. Life did not heal quickly, but it moved forward. Quietly. Life did not heal quickly, but it did not stop either. Days passed the way they always had. Slow mornings. Quiet afternoons. Evenings filled with thoughts that refused to rest. Michael kept his distance, but he did not disappear. Sometimes he called. Sometimes he did not. When he did, his voice sounded careful, like someone walking on broken glass. Daniel stayed away unless invited. He respected the space, even when it hurt him. And I stayed where I had always been, in the middle, trying to understand a life that no longer followed the rules I once knew. Some nights, I lay awake and thought about the woman I used to be. The young wife who believed love could protect her from anything. The young mother who believed honesty would always be enough. I wondered where she had gone. One afternoon, Michael came by without calling first. He stood in the doorway for a moment before stepping inside. "I just needed to see you," he said. I nodded and made tea. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where so many conversations had happened. Some happy, some painful. "Do you regret forgiving him?" Michael asked quietly. I thought about it before answering. "No," I said. "I regret the years I blamed myself for something I didn't choose." He looked at me for a long moment. "You carried everything alone," he said. I didn't see it before. That sentence settled gently in my chest. For the first time in years, I felt understood. Not as a mother, not as a widow, but as a woman. Weeks later, Michael agreed to meet Daniel again. Not at the house. At a small cafe near his office. He told me about it afterward. He didn't ask for anything, Michael said. He just listened. Listening mattered. Sometimes, healing does not come from words. It comes from presence. Slowly, the anger in Michael softened. Not disappeared, but changed. He still did not call Daniel his father. And no one asked him to. Daniel accepted that quietly. One evening, Daniel came over for dinner. It was the first time in years that the three of us sat at the same table. The food was simple. The conversation even simpler. No one mentioned the past. No one forced the future. And somehow, that was enough. After dinner, Daniel helped me wash the dishes. We stood side by side, like we used to. "I don't expect anything," he said softly. "Not forgiveness. Not love." I nodded. "But I'm grateful you let me exist again," he added. I did not answer right away. Then I said, "I'm grateful I no longer have to carry unanswered questions." That was the truth. Forgiveness did not make me forget. It made me lighter. Months passed. Life found a new rhythm. Sometimes Daniel visited. Sometimes he didn't. Sometimes Michael joined us. Sometimes he chose not to. And that was okay. One afternoon, while cleaning an old cupboard, I found a box of letters. Letters I had written to Daniel after his death. Letters I never sent. I sat on the floor and read them one by one. They were full of pain, but also love. I realized something then. I had not wasted my life loving a man who disappeared. I had lived honestly, even in grief. And that mattered. Later that evening, Daniel asked me something. "Do you ever wish we could go back?" he asked. I shook my head slowly. "No," I said. "I wish we could understand what we lived through. That's all." He nodded. Understanding was something we both needed. Today, my house is quiet again. But it is a peaceful quiet. Michael visits often now. Sometimes with his children. Their laughter fills the rooms. Their voices bring life back into corners that once held only silence. Daniel sits quietly when they are here. Watching. Listening. He does not try to reclaim time. He knows it cannot be reclaimed. And I no longer feel the need to fix what cannot be fixed. Life did not give me the ending I imagined. But it gave me clarity. It taught me that truth can arrive late. That forgiveness can be quiet. And that healing does not always look like happiness. Sometimes, healing looks like peace. They told me my husband died. I lived half my life believing it. Then I met him again. And in meeting him, I finally understood something important. Some stories do not end the way we expect. But they still end with meaning. And that is enough. Even after all this, there were days when the past returned quietly. Not with noise. Not with drama. It returned in small moments. When I reached for an extra cup while making tea. When I folded a shirt and realized I was folding it the way Daniel used to. When I heard Michael laugh and recognized the sound in his father's voice. These moments did not hurt the way they once did. They felt tender. Like reminders instead of wounds. One morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The house was still dark. I sat near the window and watched the sky slowly change color. For years, mornings were the hardest part of my day. Waking up meant remembering again. Remembering that Daniel was gone. That the life I imagined was over. Now, waking up felt different. Not joyful, but steady. I realized something then. For 25 years, my life had been shaped by waiting. Waiting for answers. Waiting for acceptance. Waiting for pain to soften. And now, slowly, I was no longer waiting. Daniel and I never spoke about rebuilding what we had. There were no conversations about us or what could be. That chapter had ended long ago. Instead, we spoke about ordinary things. Books. Weather. Michael's children. Sometimes we spoke about the past, but gently. Like touching something fragile. One afternoon, he asked me something unexpected. "Were you angry at me all these years?" he asked. I thought about it carefully. "No," I said. "I was sad. Anger needs energy. I was too tired for that." He nodded. "I deserved anger," he said. "Maybe," I replied. "But carrying it would have only hurt me." That was when I truly understood forgiveness. It was not a gift to him. It was a release for me. Michael's relationship with his father continued to change slowly. There were days when he was distant. Days when he was curious. Days when he was quiet. I never pushed him. Every person heals at their own pace. One evening, Michael stayed late after dinner. The house was quiet again. He looked at me and said, "I used to imagine what my life would be like if Dad were still alive." I listened. "I thought it would be better," he continued. "Easier." He paused. "But now I realize, it would have just been different." That sentence carried wisdom. Life does not promise better. It only promises different. Sometimes, Daniel would bring small gifts for the children. Books. Simple toys. He never tried to buy love. He never tried to replace time. He just showed up. And showing up mattered. One afternoon, I watched him sit on the floor with his grandchild, listening carefully as the child spoke nonsense stories with complete seriousness. Daniel listened like every word mattered. And in that moment, I felt something gentle inside me. Not regret. Not longing. Peace. There were still moments of sadness. Sometimes I wondered what my life would have been like if none of this had happened. If the accident had never occurred. If fear had not stolen years from us. But those thoughts no longer stayed long. I had learned something important. Imagining another life does not make this one easier. Accepting this one does. One rainy evening, much like the day I first saw him again, Daniel stood at the door, ready to leave. He paused. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" I asked. "For letting the truth exist," he replied. "For not turning it into something bitter." I nodded. "The truth was never the enemy," I said. "Silence was." He smiled gently. And then he left. That night, I slept deeply. No dreams. No memories. Just rest. When I woke up, the house felt light. Not empty. Not full. Balanced. As time passed, people stopped asking questions. Stopped whispering. Life settled. I no longer felt like a woman defined by loss. Or by reunion. I was simply a woman who had lived. Who had loved. Who had survived confusion. Who had chosen peace. And that felt enough. If someone were to ask me today what I learned from all this, I would say this. Sometimes the truth comes too late to fix the past. But it always comes in time to free the future. Sometimes forgiveness does not rebuild relationships. It rebuilds the person who forgives. And sometimes, meeting someone again does not change who they are. It changes who you become. I was told my husband died. I lived with that truth for half my life. Then I met him again. And in that moment, I realized something quietly powerful. My life was never defined by what I lost. It was defined by how I chose to carry it. And finally, I chose to put it down. After that realization, I began to notice changes in myself that I had not expected. Small changes. I stopped rushing through my days. I stopped filling silence with noise. I allowed myself to sit quietly without feeling guilty for it. For many years, silence scared me. It reminded me of what I had lost. Now, silence felt different. It felt like space. Like room to breathe. I started walking every morning, just after sunrise. Not for exercise. Just to feel the day begin. The streets were calm at that hour. Shops still closed. Birds louder than cars. As I walked, memories sometimes followed me. But they no longer chased me. They walked beside me. I remembered mornings from years ago, when Daniel used to leave early for work. How I would wake up just enough to hear the door close. How I would turn over and fall asleep again, knowing he would return. For a long time, that memory hurt. Now, it simply existed. One day, while walking, I passed a small park. I had walked past it many times before without stopping. That morning, I sat on a bench. I watched children play. Parents talking quietly nearby. Grandparents sitting with tired smiles. I realized something gently. I had always thought my life paused the day Daniel disappeared. But it hadn't. It had moved forward quietly, patiently, even when I did not notice. I had raised a son. I had built a home. I had survived nights that felt endless. That mattered. Michael began visiting more often. Not because he felt obligated, but because he wanted to. Sometimes he brought his children. Sometimes he came alone. One evening, as we sat together after dinner, he asked me something I had never expected. "Do you think you were happy?" he asked. I thought about it. "Not always," I said honestly. But I don't think happiness is the only measure of a life. He nodded. I think you were strong, he said. That word stayed with me. Strong. I had never felt strong. But maybe strength does not feel like confidence. Maybe it feels like continuing even when you are unsure. Daniel remained a quiet presence in our lives. He never stayed too long. He never crossed lines. Sometimes he sat with me in the living room, both of us reading different books. Not speaking. Just sharing space. One afternoon, he looked up from his book and said, I used to imagine what I would say if I ever saw you again. I looked at him. What did you imagine? I asked. That I would explain everything, he said. That you would understand. That it would fix things. He paused. But seeing you again taught me something. What? I asked. That some explanations come too late, he said. And that understanding doesn't always mean agreement. I nodded. That's true, I said. We went back to reading. That quiet moment felt honest. As months turned into a year, the sharp edges of the story softened. Not because the story changed, but because I did. I stopped introducing myself in my own mind as a widow, or as a woman whose husband returned from the dead. I was just myself. A woman who had lived through confusion and survived it. I found joy in ordinary things again. Cooking slowly. Rearranging furniture. Calling an old friend. One afternoon, I cleaned out a box of photographs. Pictures of Daniel and me when we were young. Pictures of Michael as a child. I did not hide them away. I placed a few in frames and set them on a shelf. Not as a shrine, but as a reminder. This life happened. And it mattered. There were moments when people asked questions. Curious questions. Careless questions. What was it like to see him again? Didn't you feel angry? Would you take him back? I answered gently when I could. And when I couldn't, I changed the subject. Not every story is meant to be explained. Some are meant to be understood quietly. One evening, Daniel asked me something I had been waiting to hear. Are you at peace? He asked. I thought carefully. Yes, I said. I am. He smiled. That's all I ever hoped for, he said. And I believed him. That night, I stood in the doorway and watched him walk away. Not with sadness. Not with longing. With acceptance. Some people are meant to walk with you for a season. Some for a lifetime. Some return only to teach you how to let go properly. Daniel had done that. As I write this now, the house is quiet again. The kind of quiet that feels settled. The kind that does not ask questions. I sit by the window in the evening, watching the light fade, and I feel something I never expected to feel again. Gratitude. Not for the pain, not for the loss, but for the understanding that followed. If you are listening to this story and carrying something heavy, I want you to know this. Your life is not defined by what you lose. It is defined by what you choose to carry forward. Truth may arrive late. Forgiveness may arrive slowly. But peace arrives the moment you stop fighting what has already happened. I was told my husband died. I lived many years believing it. Then I met him again. And in that meeting, I did not find the past. I found myself. In the days that followed, I began to understand something very quietly. Healing does not arrive all at once. It arrives in pieces. Small enough that you almost miss them. One morning, I woke up and realized I had slept through the night. No sudden memories. No heavy dreams. Just sleep. That had not happened in years. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, holding that feeling. Not excitement. Not relief. Just calm. For a long time, calm felt unfamiliar to me. Like something meant for other people. Now it was sitting beside me, gently, without asking anything in return. I began to notice how much of my life I had spent being careful. Careful with my words. Careful with my emotions. Careful not to hope too much. After Daniel disappeared, hope felt dangerous. It felt like something that could be taken away again. So I learned to live without it. But meeting him again changed that. Not because it brought hope back, but because it showed me that even without hope, I had survived. That realization gave me a different kind of strength. Michael's children started coming over more often. They ran through the house without hesitation. They laughed loudly. They asked endless questions. They did not know the history of these walls. They did not feel the weight I once carried here. And that was a gift. One afternoon, my granddaughter asked me, "Grandma, why do you like sitting near the window so much?" I thought about it. "Because I like watching things change," I said. She nodded, satisfied with that answer. Children understand more than we think. Daniel remained a quiet figure in the background of our lives. He did not try to explain himself again. He did not try to fix the past. He accepted his place, whatever it was. Sometimes, when he visited, we would sit outside in the evening. The sky turning darker. The air cooler. "I used to think coming back would make everything better," he said once. I was wrong. I did not argue. "Coming back didn't fix anything," he continued. "But telling the truth did." That was the most honest thing he had said. I began writing again. Not letters. Not explanations. Just thoughts. Small moments from my life. Things I never said out loud. I wrote about the first night I slept alone. About the first time Michael stopped asking about his father. About the way silence can feel loud. Writing did not erase the memories, but it placed them somewhere safe. Outside of me. There were still moments when sadness arrived. It arrived without warning. While washing dishes. While folding laundry. While hearing a song from long ago. But sadness no longer scared me. I let it sit with me for a while. Then I let it leave. I no longer chased it away. And I no longer held on to it. One evening, Michael stayed back after everyone had left. He sat across from me and said, "I think I finally understand something." I waited. "I spent my whole life thinking something was missing," he said. "But now I see, it wasn't missing. It was just different." I reached across the table and held his hand. "You did well," I said. "With what you were given." His eyes filled with tears. "So did you," he said. That moment healed something deeper than words. As the seasons changed, so did my relationship with time. I stopped measuring my life in years lost. I stopped counting what could have been. I began noticing what was. Morning light. Warm tea. A phone call from my son. Children's laughter in the next room. These things were not small. They were life. Sometimes people think forgiveness is about forgetting. It is not. I remember everything. Forgiveness is about choosing not to let the memory control your future. I did not forget what happened. I simply stopped living inside it. One night, long after everyone had gone home, I stood alone in the living room. I looked around slowly. This house had seen grief. It had seen confusion. It had seen reunion. And now, it saw peace. I placed my hand on the wall and whispered thank you. Not to anyone in particular. Just to life. If there is one thing I want this story to leave behind, it is this. You do not need perfect answers to move forward. You do not need a happy ending to find peace. Sometimes, peace comes from understanding that you survived something you never thought you would. I was told my husband died. I lived with that truth for half my life. Then I met him again. And that meeting did not give me back the past. It gave me permission to finally live the present. And that, for me, was enough. As more time passed, I began to notice how gently life was asking me to stay present. Not loudly, not urgently, just quietly. I no longer woke up thinking about what had gone wrong. I woke up thinking about what needed to be done that day. What to cook, who to call, whether the weather would change. These simple thoughts felt like a gift. For many years, my mind had been crowded with memories. Now it had space. One afternoon, while sitting near the window, I realized I had gone an entire day without thinking about the accident. That surprised me. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I had spent so long believing forgetting was impossible. Yet here I was, living. I began spending more time outside the house. Not because I wanted to escape it, but because I wanted to reconnect with the world beyond it. I visited a small library nearby, a place I had not entered in years. The smell of books felt comforting, familiar. I sat there quietly, turning pages slowly. For a long time, reading had been difficult for me. My mind wandered too easily. Now, I found myself staying with the words, staying with the moment. Sometimes, Daniel joined me for short walks. We did not talk much during those walks. And that was fine. There was a time when silence between us felt heavy. Now it felt respectful. One afternoon, as we walked past a row of old houses, he stopped and said, "I used to imagine this moment differently." I looked at him. "I thought I would come back and fix everything," he said. "I didn't understand that some things are not meant to be fixed." I nodded. "Some things are meant to be accepted," I said. He smiled gently. "Yes," he said. "And accepting them is harder than fixing them." Michael's children grew comfortable in my home. They had favorite corners, favorite chairs. One of them liked to sit near the window with me. "Tell me a story," she would say. I told her simple stories. Not about loss, not about pain. Stories about gardens, about animals, about kindness. And as I spoke, I realized something. I was no longer afraid of my voice shaking. I was no longer afraid of emotion. I trusted myself again. One evening, Michael and I sat together after everyone had left. The house was quiet. He looked at me and said, "I used to think you were sad all the time." I smiled softly. "I was," I said. "But sadness is not the same as weakness." He nodded. "I see that now," he said. That meant more to me than he knew. Daniel never asked me for forgiveness again. He did not repeat apologies. He let his actions speak. Consistency, respect, patience. That mattered more than words. Sometimes, he would bring small things for the house. A plant, a book. Never expensive, never dramatic, just thoughtful. One day, while arranging flowers in a vase, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I looked older. That was true. But I also looked calmer. My eyes did not carry the same weight they once did. I smiled at myself. That smile felt earned. I began to understand something about time. Time does not heal by itself. It gives you chances to heal. What you do with those chances matters. I had spent years surviving. Now, I was living. There were still nights when memories returned. But now, when they did, I spoke to them quietly. I acknowledged them. Then I let them go. I did not fight them anymore. One afternoon, Daniel asked me if I would ever tell this story to someone else. "I don't know," I said. "Maybe." "Why?" he asked. "Because some stories are not meant to explain," I replied. "They are meant to comfort." He nodded. As the seasons changed again, I noticed how deeply settled my life felt. Not exciting, not dramatic, just steady. And for the first time in a long time, Steady felt enough. I no longer thought of my life as divided into before and after. I thought of it as one long journey, with turns I did not expect, with lessons I did not ask for, but with meaning. Sometimes people say that meeting someone again brings closure. That was not true for me. Closure did not come from seeing Daniel alive. It came from understanding that I had survived without him, and that survival had shaped me into someone stronger than I ever realized. One evening, sitting alone, I whispered something I had never said out loud before. I did the best I could. And for the first time, I believed it. I do not know how much time I have left in this life. None of us do. But I know this. I will not spend it waiting for answers that no longer matter. I will spend it noticing the light in the morning, the warmth of tea in my hands, the sound of laughter in my home. If this story teaches anything, let it be this. Life does not ask you to understand everything. It asks you to keep going. I was told my husband died. I lived many years believing it. Then I met him again. And that meeting did not give me back what I lost. It gave me clarity, and clarity gave me peace. In the quiet days that followed, I found myself thinking less about what had happened and more about how I wanted to live whatever time was left. Not in big plans, not in promises, in small choices. I chose to wake up without rushing. I chose to sit with my tea until it cooled. I chose to answer calls when I felt ready, not because I felt obligated. For a long time, my life had been shaped by duty. Duty to my son. Duty to grief. Duty to survival. Now, I allowed myself a different kind of duty. The duty to be kind to myself. I noticed how gently my days flowed when I stopped resisting them. Morning light entered the house the same way every day. Soft and patient. I began opening the windows more often, letting air move through rooms that once felt heavy. I cleaned less. I rested more. I laughed when I felt like laughing, and when I felt tired, I rested without apology. That felt new. One afternoon, as I sat near the window, I thought about the woman I had been all those years ago. The woman who heard the words, "Your husband is dead," and believed her life had ended. I wished I could sit beside her. I wished I could tell her something simple. That she would survive this. That she would raise her son with strength. That she would learn to live again. And that one day, she would feel peace. Not happiness in the way stories promise, but peace in the way real life delivers. Michael visited one evening alone. We sat together quietly. After some time, he said, "I think I finally understand what you went through." I looked at him. "Not completely," he added, "but enough." I nodded. That was all I needed. Understanding does not need to be complete to be meaningful. Daniel called occasionally. Our conversations were short, gentle. We did not revisit the past. There was nothing left to say there. We spoke about ordinary things. Health, weather, life. And when the call ended, I felt no heaviness. Only calm. That told me everything I needed to know. As I grew older, my world became smaller. But it also became clearer. I no longer chased answers. I no longer replayed moments. I accepted that some things simply are. And that acceptance did not make me weak. It made me free. One evening, as the sun was setting, I stood alone in the living room. The light touched the walls softly. This house had seen sorrow. It had seen confusion. It had seen truth arrive late. And now, it held something else. Peace. I placed my hand on my chest and felt my breath slow. I was still here. That mattered. If someone asked me now what my story is about, I would say this. It is not about a husband who disappeared. It is not about a reunion after decades. It is about a woman who learned that life does not owe us explanations. It owes us moments. And it is our choice whether we notice them. I was told my husband died. I lived many years believing it. Then I met him again. And that meeting did not bring my past back to me. It gave me permission to finally let it rest. Today, I live quietly. I wake. I breathe. I notice. And that is enough. I no longer measure my life by what I lost. I measure it by what I carried forward. Kindness, strength, peace. If you are listening to this and holding something heavy, I want you to hear this. You do not have to solve your past to live your future. You only have to decide how much of that past you will carry with you. I carried it for a long time. And then, gently, I put it down. This is where my story rests. Not with answers. Not with certainty. But with peace. And peace, after everything, is more than enough.